G'day mate, 40 here. So what the heck's going on with all these university protests, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel? What's the significance? Like, why the heck is this dominating the news? And it's not dominating my Twitter, right? Great news, I'm up on Twitter. Just absolutely killing it on Twitter. I've got 125 likes and 4 followers. Here, what am I saying on Twitter?
Right, John.
Come on, man.
News organizations can't really publish
Come on, man.
stories that are overwhelmingly relying on unofficial sources, because that will leave them wide open for libel. It's just not how the news business works. But the best journalists like Paul Pringle, they get these unofficial sources. Find out that, say, USC's medical dean is present at a drug overdose at a hotel. And then they chase. Police report and official documentation confirming what they already know. Now they have a news story. Right? You got the information already just from talking to informed sources. But you don't have a news story, generally speaking, until you can tie it in to that sort of official proclamation, documentation. And without documentation, journalists, news organizations can't really publish stories that are overwhelmingly relying on unofficial sources, because that will leave them wide open for libel. It's just not how the news business works. But the best journalists like Paul Pringle, they get these unofficial sources.
Wait.
Find out that, say, USC's medical dean is present at a...
Isn't this supposed to...
People need to be incentivized to stay on the straight and narrow. And when they start acting in an antisocial manner, they need to be held accountable as quickly as possible at appropriate levels of deterrence, so that you can maintain civilizations like this. If there's no deterrence for trashing the Royal Botanical Gardens, that wouldn't be here to enjoy. There's no deterrence for seizing someone's purse, stealing someone's pizza, for invading someone's home, for spray painting. Right. No graffiti. How do they manage to create this safe space with no graffiti? Like, this doesn't look like Mexico. This doesn't look like Central or South America. It doesn't look like New York City, Los Angeles, or Chicago. I know it's different. How do you develop a community that's so pro-social, high trust, socially cohesive, altruistic? Willing to sacrifice for the greater good, sense of unifying culture. Australia has a dominant culture. Everybody says Merry Christmas.
Okay, come on, aren't you supposed to... TikTok, come on now. Aren't you supposed to be running another
and even
video?
The animals, even the ducks don't have fear. How come you don't have any fear, mate? Where's your sense of fear? Don't you have any sense of danger? You don't seem afraid, mate. I just wonder, can Los Angeles sustain something like this? Is people walking around being happy? I mean, do we need a common culture in Los Angeles? A respect for private property, public property, for plant diversity, human biodiversity? Like, can we have a common culture where people who are predatory and destructive, they're removed from polite society, so that good people can enjoy public spaces like these?
Such a sharp contrast to what's going on American university campuses.
A quarter mile from the central business district. They've got all these skyscrapers looming above Royal Botanical Gardens. They've got the hustle and bustle of a big city, one of the safest cities in the world.
Okay, what the heck is going on with the UCLA protests?
If you're filled with self-loathing and anxiety,
come on, man.
Volatility, all right, you're going to be much more vulnerable to burning bridges. And so you see this throughout the distant sphere in general. People are quite quick to burn bridges and move on, and it's very hard for dissidents to maintain relationships with other, volatile characters in their midst.
Hey, what else do we have here from UCLA? We all, appreciate a compliment. It is, to what extent have you depended upon other people telling you who you are? For me, I've depended way too much, like to a maladaptive extent. I saw a psychiatrist for 3 hours in year 2000 because my family was so worried about me, they paid for me to fly back to Australia to see the doctors of their choice. One of them was a psychiatrist who said Luke Ford depends upon other people to tell him who he is. That was not a good thing. It wasn't a normal, appreciating other people's perspective and feedback. This was a maladaptive role that, one, I was out of touch with reality, and two, I consistently depended upon other people to tell me who I am. And the big danger with that is that 95% of the time, people aren't going to bother. So for every time someone gave me a criticism, there are at least 20 other people who had the same criticism, but they just weren't going to bother to share it with me. We all, appreciate a compliment. Okay, so one thing that jumps out at me about these protests is that it's not exactly the best and the brightest. So I don't think it's a coincidence that these protests happen in May just before exams. So I think by and large, these are affirmative action students looking for a cheap and easy way out of being held accountable for their lack of diligence with their studies. All right, Israel has been bombing the heck out of Gaza since October. And these college protests have only risen in the past week. So you got beautiful weather, you got the opportunity to possibly postpone exams and to riot and to have some excitement because you just can't cut it at college. So I think that's a dominant thread of the riots. Number two, it's just really hard for me to see any wider significance to the riots because foreign policy in particular, right, that's something that takes place among elites. And yet what's dominating the news is these anti-Israel, pro-Palestine rioters. And it's interesting that UCLA, out of all the universities in the United States of America, has featured the strongest counter-protests by the pro-Israel side. And so the tribal side of me identifies with the counter-protests because many Jewish students being denied access to the library, being denied access through the quad, which is the center of UCLA, right? They've had their lives made much more difficult by virtue of the pro-Palestine crowd occupying a significant portion of UCLA territory and then denying access to Jewish students. So why would Jews not be up in arms, and why would they not want to fight back? And so it's not fighting back against another party's legal protest. All right, this other crowd has occupied illegally vital territory right in the middle of UCLA and then denied on the basis of ethnic identity, right, the right to pass and to function essentially as a UCLA student. So it seems very self-interested that Jews would want to fight that.
A Fox News alert happening right now. The LAPD is moving in on the UCLA campus after anti-Israel protests turned violent overnight. Brawls between pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel protesters erupting throughout the campus. You are watching Fox and Friends First. On this Wednesday morning, I'm Carly Shimkus.
And I am Todd Pyro. The violence happening right now at UCLA, just one of many developing situations on West Coast campuses overnight. Lucas Tomlinson here with the very latest. Lucas.
Good morning, Carly and Todd. Violence erupting on the campus of UCLA overnight. Local reports say this began when hundreds of pro-Israel supporters took on the anti-Israel protesters and tried to dismantle their encampment. Let's take a look at the video here. You see flashbangs. You see signs of pepper spray, fireworks being set off. There are some reports that ambulances arrived on scene. You see a motorcycle there. We have just received this statement from LA's Deputy Mayor of Communications, who says, quote, "The mayor has spoken to Chancellor Block and Chief Choi. LAPD is responding immediately to Chancellor Block's request for support."
Well, they responded rather gingerly. And when you don't call the police and you just allow a lawless situation to develop and to grow, right? The police, when you finally call them, they're not going to necessarily roll into action right away, right? The police are only going to roll into action once they have overwhelming support. And the powers that be at UCLA and in Los Angeles, right, they just allowed this lawless behavior to go on for days and days by the pro-Palestine crowd. And yeah, it's going to take the LAPD a while.
On campus, as you mentioned, we've been told riot police have just arrived on the campus of UCLA. People are...
Yeah, they arrived about 4 hours before they actually did anything, because you can't just arrive. You also need a plan. So here's my experience. No, that's not my experience. Here's my experience covering dueling rallies on late Sunday morning, early Sunday afternoon. Right, here we go.
Me and Lone Love.
So check out the average age of the pro-Palestine crowd. Seems to be much younger, by and large, than the pro-Israel crowd. Now, the pro-Palestine crowd exercised a lot of message discipline, right? They didn't want anyone speaking, so it was quite difficult to get interview. About 1,000 people showed up for each side.
Walk straight to the big flagpole. Walk straight. You fucking rapist!
Oh, hey, excuse me. Could I'm live on YouTube. Could I get could you talk about why you're here?
One sentence. The Jews and the Palestinians once lived peaceably. They will do it again. We will not tolerate 40,000 Palestinians dying. We will not tolerate one Israeli dying either. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Do you feel like talking about what's going on? I'm on YouTube right now. Could you tell me a little bit about why you're here?
I am here because I am protesting the ongoing genocide occurring in Palestine. Although this may have been going on for October 7th in American public consciousness, this has been going on for 75 years. There have been protests since 1948 when this occurred, and we are still here protesting today. I am honoring generations. Oh my goodness, it's
Sorry.
violent. As you can see, our side is very peaceful.
Yeah.
The other side is screaming at us, yelling at us. They have started getting a bit aggressive.
And she's not wrong that at that moment, all right, and at various moments during this protest, yeah, the counter-protesters in the pro-Israel camp were more violent. And then at other times, the pro-Palestine crowd would deny access to the library and to many campus routes and facilities just to Jewish students.
They've come on to our side. There are very clear marks over here.
Right.
So I think that
yeah, it did seem like there was a lot of pent-up aggression on the part of Jews who'd been watching coverage of these pro-Palestine riots dominating the news, even though there's so little importance to what's going on, because foreign policy, like almost all of life, is operated hierarchically. It's really determined by a very tiny number of people, and no matter how many millions of people turn out for pro-Palestine riots, that's not going to make much of an effect in U.S. foreign policy. If anything, it will work against what they're trying to achieve, just like the Black Lives Matter riots worked in favor of Donald Trump, right? Without Black Lives Matter, Donald Trump would not have been elected in 2016, and due to Black Lives Matter riots in 2020, he almost got reelected.
That in and of itself kind of proves the type of people and what they are supporting. All I have to say is if you are still not opening your eyes and seeing the horrors of what's going on, it's not too late to wake up and free Palestine, inshallah.
What do you think it'll take to wake people up? Because people tend to just be very tribal in their views. What do you think?
This is a lot of misinformation and years of brainwashing. I myself have done a lot of research and spoke to a lot of different people who, may have been Zionists before, but have actually researched and educated themselves and gotten out of it. All I can say is no one who has been pro-Palestine and researched Israel became pro-Israel, but everyone who researches and educates themselves on Palestine converts from being someone who supports Israel to supporting Palestine. I believe that Jewish people have a right to safety. This is not safety. This is rape. This is genocide. This is murdering. There are countless incidents.
So I wonder what the basis that she is saying that the Zionists are committing rape. I haven't seen that brought up elsewhere.
That we are talking about every.
I mean, overwhelmingly, the IDF has been known for its lack of interest in raping Arab women, to the best of my knowledge.
Every single day of horrors inflicted on the Palestinian people. And the reason that we are protesting here in America is because America is the reason for it. They are the ones funding. Without America, Israel would be nothing in terms of their ability to commit this genocide. So all we can do is really protest the American involvement and hope for a freer Palestine, starting with our government. There is no reason why we should be having homeless people, poor veterans, the issues that we are having in America, and sending billions of dollars to any country. I myself am from Pakistan. I wouldn't want America to be sending billions to Pakistan if our country was like this. So hopefully...
You're very good. You're very good. Like, I really...
Yeah, she's very articulate, isn't she? She's makes a better case for her side than almost anyone else I've heard.
Because I'm Zionist, but I have sympathy for anyone who's appalled at what's going on in Gaza. Like, how could anyone not feel sick about what's going on?
It's not even about, I feel like a lot of people feel, especially Zionists and some Jewish people feel like, oh, we're calling for an abolition.
I want to apologize for that.
This is making you guys look very bad.
Yeah.
So you can see an extreme difference. I mean, I hope you're recording this between the protesters. Because the protesters are the ones who are actually representing their governments. We come peacefully. These people have came and attacked us.
I saw that.
Screaming at me, yelling at me, and I finally turned to them and I said, please fight with people your own age.
And there are a lot of...
I'm educated, but...
And there are a lot of people who want to hurt your job prospects.
Oh yeah, people are recording us left and right. That's why we've already gotten a lot of comments as to why we are covering our faces. The thing is, how about you research who controls jobs and who controls the media, then you will understand why we are covering our face the way we are.
Right, like I'm Zionist, but I don't want your job prospects hurt because you have a different point of view. Like, I think that's terrible. I don't want you being subjected to anything negative. Like, you have every right and every moral right to stand up for what you believe.
When I see these protests, I get confused because what we are protesting is a genocide of 35,000 people, 70% being women and children. If I see a picture of a dead Israeli baby, I am upset, I am horrified. These people see pictures of dead children in Gaza and they celebrate. There are pictures of your national security defense going and burning houses down and celebrating the death of an 18-month-old baby. This is not okay.
Yeah, like, I'm Zionist, but most of the people I have on my...
Okay, and then I tried to move to the Israel side, and we were blocked by a line of pro-Palestine protesters. Right, they would just get in the way, and they're blocking.
You feel like talking about your point of view?
The Israel camp. So they did.
Do you feel like talking about your perspective on it? I'm independent. I am Zionist, but I think you have every right to say your point of view and not have your job prospects or your life damaged. So most of the people I interview are opposed to Zionism.
Thanks for the offer, but no thank you.
Okay, cool.
See, they won't let people through. Right, this is on the Israel side of the dueling protests, right? Right, so this lineup of pro-Palestine protesters have gone into the Israel side of the protest and denying access to Jews. So if Jews didn't bull their way through this line, all right, the police and security weren't going to help them out, right? There were police and security around, but they allowed the pro-Palestine crowd to block off entrance to the pro-Israel rally. So it just took one strong pro-Israel dude to crash, break the line, and then dozens of members of the pro-Israel crowd were able to get to their rally. So smart, savvy move on part of the pro-Israel crowd, wrapping themselves in the American flag and playing the national anthem. Right, back to Fox News.
Why they feel so helpless on the campus and why the police didn't arrive sooner, because the violence has been taking place for hours, Todd and Carly. Our colleagues at Fox 11 LA show what appear to be private security officers standing around watching the chaos. Here's how one witness described it.
Yeah, by and large, police are not going to be protecting you, right? They'll protect you a little bit, but by and large, they will stand and watch, and then they'll come clean up afterwards, and they'll secure the perimeter. But it's just not a good strategy for any sane person or sane community to entirely rely on police for your protection. You want excellent relationships with the police, like you want great relationships with everybody possible, right? You want to form alliances. You want to get along with the police, but you really need to protect your own community and your own home by legally owning a gun, by getting trained how to use it, by getting licensed to carry, by forming legal security services that obey the law, that have lawyers, that have insurance, that operate with a strong hierarchy, that train people, because your own kind is going to be much quicker and much more incentivized to come to your rescue. So Orthodox Jews developed Hatzalah. It's a Jewish ambulance service, which tends to arrive much more quickly than the regular ambulance.
There's people getting hurt. There are people getting injured, and the police officers left their post. They were here, they left. The security has abandoned this encampment, this riot. Okay, you hung up on me. I called earlier, and you hung up on me. So, did you just hung up on me again? I came down here to see what's going on, and I cannot believe what I'm seeing. I'm looking at people, violence. Look at this. They're throwing things at each other. They're pepper spraying each other. How are they allowed to have weapons on campus?
We've just received this statement from UCLA, which says the established encampment is unlawful and violates university policy. Law enforcement is prepared to arrest individuals in accordance with applicable law. Non-UCLA persons are notified.
We do begin with that breaking news. There is a large law enforcement presence now on the campus of UCLA.
So, I tribally sympathize with the counter-protesters here, because this encampment was hurting Jewish kids, all right? It was diminishing their education, and why would Jews just sit back and be A-OK with an illegal encampment that is hurting them, right? So I admire their chutzpah for standing up for themselves. Right now, if the pro-Palestine crowd were acting legally, then I'd be appalled at this violence. Right? If the pro-Palestine crowd was acting within the law, then I'd be appalled at any violence thrown against them. But they're not. They've occupied territory. They are smearing the campus. They are making life difficult for students who don't agree with them. Right? They're creating a disruption, and chaos breeds more chaos. Disorder breeds more disorder, right? You don't want to get into a fight, generally speaking, because fights tend to escalate. You don't want to get into a war, generally speaking, because wars tend to escalate. People tend to, up each other and bring more and more levels of intensity. And generally speaking, it's not the best and the brightest who are out here rioting on either side, because of the best and the brightest know that violent rioting is against their own self-interest. but it's people with less to lose, right? I don't think it's future surgeons of America who are leading the violence on either side.
Those simmering tensions over dueling protests overnight.
So if you are illegally occupying territory and you are, being hostile and vicious and upsetting and denying freedom of movement to other people, then it doesn't bother me if violence is used to disrupt you, to remove incentives for you to carry on in a violent method. So even if I weren't Jewish, I would support this counter-protest against those committing like an illegal occupation that is distracting from the business of learning at UCLA.
Explode. Pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli supporters going at it with sticks, fists, even fireworks.
We have team coverage this morning. We begin with Gigi Graciette. She's live at UCLA, where police have shown up in force.
That's right. And in the 3 hours or so that we've been here, this is actually the first moment of calm that we've had all morning long here on the UCLA campus. Now, we are near the pro-Palestine encampment. Hard to see the actual protesters, demonstrators, because they've put up wooden. They have gone home now, so all is quiet. But let me show you what it looked like at about 10:45 last night. That's when about 150 to 200 pro-Israel demonstrators arrived and faced off with the demonstrators inside.
This gets to a bigger point. All right, if police won't enforce the law, all right, if political leaders won't encourage police to enforce the law, if those who dominate our institutions discourage the police from enforcing the law, such as we saw in the aftermath of the George Floyd protests, right, then citizens are going to have to take the law into their own hands, right? If this illegal encampment had been destroyed and the people in it had been arrested and expelled from the university, right, there would be no need for a counter-protest, right? When police don't enforce the law, when our leading institutions discourage police from enforcing the law, then you'll have to have more and more of vigilante justice just like this. This is the only way forward if you discourage and disincentivize police from enforcing the law.
The pro-Palestine encampment, they tried to remove some of the barricade. We're talking about those wooden boards, those pallets, and all heck broke loose. There were fights. People were using bats. We saw people with some serious head injuries, beaten and bloodied, and they were just going at it. And no.
So how many of those people with serious head injuries do you think were on a path to become a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, an accountant? How many of them do you think were beneficiaries of affirmative action, right? I would wager that the people who are getting into this violence are overwhelmingly not the best and brightest of UCLA, right? Because it's a really dumb thing to do, because you could very easily suffer permanent damage.
Police were in sight. There was no one. Now, we understand that campus security, campus police may have arrived, but then they quickly retreated. UCLA then requesting that LAPD come in, but that was after the fact, after the fight. Now, we heard from some students, both Palestinian and Israeli students, telling us they came in peace, but the truth is there was a lot of violence.
Listen, man, students can't walk through. I personally don't go to the school. I have family members that do. They're stopping students from going to their classes.
All right, do you think this guy could get into UCLA? No, he's speaking the truth. All right, people he knows or people from his team are being prevented from getting to class, going to the library, right, taking part in a UCLA education because of this illegal pro-Palestine encampment that our ruling elites did nothing about for over a week.
Make an excuse for something else. What they're doing is, and that's it. We're here to stop them from doing what they're doing.
Now, we're told the violence went on for about 3 hours before police intervened. The LAPD saying they were requested by the UCLA Police Department to assist them, and also the Sheriff's Department. And
so you just can't take, requests simply on a literal level. Come bail me out, right? Whether it's a friend, right? A friend asks you to come pick you up from the airport. Okay, I know this woman that I was seeing, and she asked me to come pick her up at the airport. And I knew in the back of my head that if I drove to the airport, it would take about 40 minutes, that she would lose patience and just get a taxi before the time I arrived. And that's exactly what happened. Now, I was willing to go through that charade because I was staying with her at the time. All right, so there were many rewards likely on tap if I showed up and tried to do the righteous thing. This was before the era of cell phones. But a request isn't just a request, right? It occurs in a context of a particular relationship. And if you are not engaging in a relationship with the LAPD, you can't expect them to come bail you out when you particularly need them, right? You want people to bail you out, then you have to have a relationship. UCLA and other government institutions have been quite reluctant to build relationships with the LAPD. As a consequence, when they really need the LAPD, right, the LAPD is not immediately going into action on their behalf, right? You expect a community, you expect individuals to go to bat for you, right? You better have a preceding relationship with them. But UCLA did not deign to develop a relationship with the LAPD. Many government institutions look down on, despise, and keep the LAPD at arm's length. Well, what happens when you keep the LAPD or anyone else at arm's length, and then you suddenly start screaming bloody murder, I need your help, 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 right? Almost all good things occur within a context. Many of my best stories as a blogger, right, were given to me, but they were given to me in the context of a relationship that I was relentlessly pursuing a lot of stories, and I was willing to take a lot of flack on behalf of uncovering the truth, and therefore people are interested in getting the truth out in the public. They had a relationship with me, even if it was a parasocial relationship, because they recognized that I was interested in uncovering stories. But if you have a negative relationship with the LAPD or any group or community, right, they're not going to be so fast to come to your rescue, right? If I see this a lot with the wives, right? They will show contempt for their husband. They won't follow their husband's guidance in matters of public safety. So often I notice many wives will want to engage with marginal, sketchy, violent, and dangerous characters and set them straight that, hey, you're engaging in antisocial behavior. And the husband says, this is way too dangerous, right? You don't want to start engaging with these type of people. They could hurt you, right? And so I notice a lot of women, a lot of wives start engaging with sketchy, dangerous, volatile men, even though the men in their life have specifically warned them, don't do this, right? I had a girlfriend who would let her dog off the leash, even though it was against the law, and she got a warning from the LAPD, all right, you're breaking the law. You need to keep your dog on a leash. And as soon as the cops left, right, she let her dog off the leash again. Police came back, wrote her a ticket, and then she just starts going at them. And I managed to shut her up, right? But when people feel anxious, when people get caught out, right, they want to gaslight you, they want to blame you, they turn volatile, right? And so women who engage with violent, sketchy characters, often get their head blocked off, smacked off, damaged, smacked around, beaten, sometimes killed. And if they survive the assault, all right, they'll blame their husband or their boyfriend or the men in their life for not protecting them. But people are not going to be terribly interested in protecting you if you're not interested in developing a relationship and a respectful protection of them. Right? So wives and women who pour out contempt for their men and don't follow their advice about not engaging with volatile, dangerous characters, right? You don't really have much of a ground to then berate your man for not rushing to your rescue because of a violent, crazy situation that you started. And the same dynamic is applicable here to UCLA, other public institutions such as like public transport in Los Angeles and other cities.
And the California Highway Patrol were called in. Now, not all the people here were students. We spoke to a lot of people who are just passionate about their separate causes, and that brought them out, including a woman who says she was watching the violence at home and felt she needed to.
Yeah, so chaos breeds more chaos, violence breeds more violence. But when you allow illegal situations to develop and to build and to strengthen, such as what many college campuses in the United States have allowed to do with these anti-Israel protests, then you have more and more anarchy, you have more and more destruction of property, you have more and more intimidation and disruption of educational life. right? Remember defund the police, right? Many of the people who were in favor of defund the police, all right, when push comes to shove, they want police protection.
Do something. She's 66 years old and spent the morning just trying to calm people down. And even with her, things got very.
Yeah, look, if you're a 66-year-old woman, don't show up at a violent protest and try to calm people down. That's just absolutely delusional. Now, people who are set on stupid behavior, it's really hard to
coming from the UCLA Palestine Solidarity Encampment
to change their mind. Right, they say their encampment will stay until their demands.
We do begin with that breaking news.
Overwhelmed security and began pulling back.
Yeah, they overwhelmed security because UCLA wasn't terribly interested in maintaining security in the first place.
The metal barricades that you can see right here, they've been trying to pull down some of the makeshift plywood that has also been used to set up this pro-Palestinian encampment. The security who have...
And chat says this is why Trump said it had to be dealt with over a week ago. If you support law and order, then you have to crush these illegal protests in the bud, right? There are legal protests and there are illegal protests. There's a big difference, just like there is legal sex and illegal sex. One form of illegal sex is child molestation. Another form of illegal sex is rape. And then legal sex refers to sex between consenting adults, all right? Religiously approved sex means sex between a man and a woman within a monogamous marriage, right? So being opposed to illegal protests doesn't mean that you oppose people's right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. But there's a dramatic difference between legal and illegal, right? Illegal sex means rape, child molestation. Legal sex is sex between a husband and wife, between consenting adults, all the difference in the world. So yeah, I'm opposed to illegal demonstrations. I'm opposed to illegal occupation. I support law and order. And universities, by allowing this situation to fester for days and days and days, right, they are setting the groundwork for some really bad things to happen, not to mention considerable disruption to what should be their primary purpose.
Have been surrounding this encampment. You can see some of these people right here. They're carrying the Israeli flag. Many of them are wearing hoodies. And look at this guy right here in the white mask. See this guy right here in the white mask? Many of them came running up wearing masks looking just like this one. Kind of a frightening scene, to be honest with you. Well, they all ran up.
Okay, so the pro-Palestine crowd was wearing masks, and initially the pro-Israel crowd were not. But when you get into a violent confrontation, right, it makes sense that more and more people are going to wear masks.
Began pulling out these barricades, and now they're actively trying to dismantle the makeshift wood.
Right, because if police won't do their job, if the university won't do its job, then it will be up to citizens to try to bring about some measure of order. Right? People do not deal well with chaos and disruption and anarchy and a sense that life is spinning out of control. So choose. Do you want the police to do their job in a lawful manner, or are you just going to allow vigilantes to try to restore order?
That is surrounding this pro-Palestinian. And now if you look over to our right, we see pepper spray. I don't know if that's police or protesters, but someone is spraying pepper spray. More people are running out of the encampment now. That definitely looks like bear spray. It looks like a bear spray canister.
Right, so nothing terribly significant, right? Because when it comes to foreign policy, that's decided by a tiny number of people. Right? Even if 90% of Americans were opposed to the United States going to war for Taiwan against China, you would still have that, right? Even if 90% of Americans were opposed to the United States militarily aiding Israel, right, you'd still probably have massive American aid to Israel because the foreign policy game is operated by elites, right? Popular opinion has very little to do with it. How much does popular opinion have to do in your workplace? All right, it plays some role. It plays a measured role, but it's rarely the deciding role. The world runs on a hierarchy. Foreign policy runs by hierarchy. Just a tiny number of people decide the direction of American foreign policy, and these protests will work against the stated aims. Because do you think that the elite running American foreign policy think that these protests should be caved into, that these should be supported, that these people should be given what they wanted? Right? No, just like with Black Lives Matter, it's only going to produce considerable pushback. Let's get something up to date from Sean
tonight,
Hannity.
the chaos continues at college campuses all across the country. Alexis McAdams will join us live from New York University, where tonight agitators are desperately trying to regroup after many arrests today. Now, this includes Fordham University, where trespassers set up tents inside an academic building and even unfurled their very own giant Antifada banner over a bridge. Meanwhile, on the left coast, UCLA classes have been canceled after what was a brutal night of violence and widespread hand-to-hand fighting as college administrators looked on and they did nothing. At the University of Wisconsin, 4 police officers were injured and nearly 36 so-called protesters were arrested after anti-Israel agitators clashed with law enforcement. At UT, Austin, Texas, numerous weapons, including firearms, were confiscated as police began making arrests there. And last night, right on this program, as it was unfolding, Columbia University thankfully was liberated from the radical pro-Hamas agitators that were squatting on.
Now, I think these protests do make some logical sense. All right, I don't believe that American foreign policy is run in American interests. I don't believe that the United States should be subsidizing Israel. I don't believe the United States should be so deeply involved in the Middle East. I believe the United States should pivot away from the Middle East, should pivot away from Europe, and instead pay primary attention to the rise of China and containing the rise of China. So I'm broadly sympathetic to many of the more articulate, intelligent critiques that are coming out of the pro-Palestine crowd. Right? Yeah, let Israel work out its own destiny with fear and trembling like any other nation state.
On campus for weeks, and recently it pillaged an academic building, reportedly even detaining 3 janitors in the process. Order, thankfully, was restored in a matter of hours without any serious injuries or incidents, all thanks to, frankly, the swift professional work of the NYPD. They deserve a round of applause. Anyway, they were forced to storm Hamilton Hall at Columbia through a second-floor window after the rioters barricaded the building and the building entryway. But the big question moving forward is, will any of these...
So why is this the #1 story right now? Because I just don't see significance to it. So there has to be an explanation. Like, let's decode why this is the #1 story. Now, I understand why it's the #1 story for Fox and for conservative outlets, because it makes Democratic-controlled institutions look bad. It splits up the Democratic coalition, right? There are a tiny number of people who are billionaires on the Democratic side of politics who are very pro-Israel. But the vast majority of the Democratic Party, right, the vast majority of its voters are not pro-Israel. Now, the vast majority of them are not anti-Israel either. So I was just reading Steve Saylor saying that Jewish Americans are overwhelmingly in favor of massive amounts of immigration. No. Jewish Americans, like Arab Americans and Christian Americans, overwhelmingly concerned with themselves, their family, and their workplace, right? Fewer than 0.5% of Jews are agitating for more immigration, right? Most Jews, most Arabs, most Muslims, most Christians are not, highly politically active. So most members of the Democratic Party are not fervently pro-Israel, just like most Republicans aren't. Now, there is a larger number of people who have a fervent perspective on the Middle East who are anti-Israel in the Democratic Party that are pro-Israel. I think that's now fair to say. Out of the hardcore Democratic activists, right, those who believe very intensely about what American policy should be in the Middle East, the majority of them are clearly anti-Israel, pro-Palestine. But overwhelmingly, the money comes from a tiny number of billionaires who are pro-Israel. So this conflict splits the Biden coalition, the Democratic Party coalition, in two. You've got the overwhelming number of its committed activists on one side who are anti-Israel, pro-Palestine. On the other side, you've got a tiny number of billionaires who are very much pro-Israel and pro the re-election of Joe Biden. Republicans overwhelmingly care primarily about America. Republicans have shifted for various reasons as a party to a pro-Israel direction, but overwhelmingly Americans care about America. They don't care about Israel. They don't care about Palestine. They don't care about Jordan. Now, people develop a reputation, right? The Palestinians have developed a reputation of causing havoc wherever they go, right? They destabilized Jordan. They've destabilized Lebanon. Egypt has very good reason to not allow them in, because there is very good reason to believe that the Palestinians would do what they do, and that is they destabilize and create havoc, right? We just don't have much reason to believe so far that the Palestinians are going to create, a peaceful, prosperous society. The average Palestinian IQ is probably 82, 83, maybe in better conditions, less cousin marriage, maybe you would get an average IQ closer to 90. I don't believe for one second that Palestinians are inherently violent or destabilizing. I do believe right now that given the conditions that they live in, that Palestinians who move to Lebanon, to Jordan, to Egypt, or to the United States will have a disproportionate number of terrorists and will be disproportionately destabilizing. Not because that's an inherent trait of Palestinians or Arabs or Muslims, but because of the situation that they're coming out of. Right, let's check out a little bit more from Sean Hannity.
These criminals, any of them, be held accountable. According to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, 280 arrests were made at Columbia and City College last night. Of those 280 arrests, 170 perpetrators were already released with a mere summons. That's basically a little more than a parking ticket or a traffic ticket. The rest, they were issued.
The only way to say how bad a crime is by its punishment, and that these people committing all sorts of crimes, occupying illegally campus buildings and campus space and creating havoc, right? You just slap them on the wrist, then you're saying that what they did is not so bad. Right? I want strong law enforcement reaction against anything that destabilizes the public square, that makes getting an education more difficult, that brings in its wake chaos and disruption and anarchy and incentivizes, more violence, whether it's from counter-protesters or just attracting a bad crowd. Right? You can tell a lot about a people by the crowd that it attracts. And both sides are attracting a bad crowd. Right? It's not immediately obvious which crowd is worse. But it seems to me that overwhelmingly the pro-Palestine crowd has not been the best and brightest in university campuses. It's affirmative action kids, by and large, who don't want to be held accountable by facing examinations.
A desk appearance ticket, which is typically used for low-level misdemeanors, and a few might be charged with felonies, but that is TBD, to be determined. In Alvin Bragg's New York, that would likely only happen to somebody with the last name Trump. So as of right now, it appears that very few will be held accountable and are now free to continue, go right back to the rioting. Now, just imagine if they were Trump supporters breaking into a building, holding staff against their will. Do you really think that Joe Biden would be as silent as he is now?
And
do you think his weaponized Department
Elliott
of Justice?
Blatt, back to the show. Long time no talk. Elliott Blatt.
Long time no blessings. Blessings, bro. Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear, bro. Thank you.
All right. Yes. Well, I was going to call in on the weekends, but it seems like you've got a new cast of characters assembled, which delights me to no end, actually. So I didn't want to, step on their toes, as it were.
It's good to have you back. I'm sorry. What did you say?
I'm more of a midweek streamer.
Aha.
Caller.
Okay.
So yeah, fun times. The lawlessness is a problem. I don't know if you picked up on this but 2 weeks back, April 15th, tax day, Palestinian protesters blocked both sides of Golden Gate Bridge for multiple hours in both directions. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know the geography of San Francisco, I don't know, but this is like a major, major headache for hundreds of thousands of people. So the disproportionate leverage that a protest like that can inflict upon the population is significant. And the cops, from all appearances, seem to be protecting the protesters against the enraged, commuters who were blocked. And this, to me, is very scary, because that tells me that, the balance of power has truly shifted.
Well, it is the result of having, sorry to be blunt, Democrats running San Francisco.
Indeed, I try not to get into such simplistic ideological, framing,
Yes.
but that's exactly what it is. And the rot has really progressed so far, and I don't see how it's going to turn around. I hate to be like a doom spiral or a black pillar, but there's no recognition. There's seemingly always an excuse that's outside of their policies, right? Their worldview. They just cannot wrap their minds around, and will not wrap their minds around, the fact that they've created the situation. And this goes all the way up the income scale. I'm not talking about your average sort of pleb protester. I'm talking about your, six-figure bureaucratic, gets a nice six-figure salary from some sort of, state bureaucracy. They don't see somebody you'd expect to know better. They don't seem to know better. And this feels scary.
Right. I mean, because these things spiral, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anarchy and disorder and illegal behavior does not tend to subside. It tends to spiral and get worse till there's a massive reaction, and just tapping people on the wrist is not a massive reaction.
That's right. And so, just for fun, I started exploring the radio dial a little bit. I've been going.
Mm-hmm.
So, every once in a while, I give NPR another shot, to see if I can endure it, or see if, because I'm basically left with a hard rock station that is just effectively retarded, or NPR, and then there's the all other parts of the radio band are like music that simply I can't even begin to relate to, like this mariachi music, these shrieking Puerto Ricans with their love songs and stuff. There's all kinds of shit on the radio dial that it's completely useless to me. So I ventured over to the NPR, and I mentioned to you that there's basically three flavors of NPR: center left, left, and far left. By far left, I mean like just out and out communists. And that's the fare that we have to deal with. So I tune into this, and it's just so funny. It's sort of like a completely mirror opposite of the ideological waters that we swim in. So from their point of view, Trump is this demon who is skillfully and adroitly evading prosecution for these horrendous crimes, And on our point of view, we just see Trump as somebody who's being persecuted for basically bookkeeping errors. So it's funny how stark the divide is.
So you were not encouraged, you were not warmed by your NPR experience.
I'm not, and it's such a loss. It's only because of live streaming.
Yeah.
Do I recognize, how narrow the conversation really is? Imagine if you had an NPR show, Luke.
Yeah.
And we could talk about other issues like about different people having different gifts and other analysis of existing problems, and that we could actually hash it out. But we can't even hash it out. We can't have the conversation. And the stranglehold that the left has on the public dialogue is very, very blackpilling.
Yeah. I mean, you would hope in a fantasy that maybe what would come out of these protests is some kind of newfound love of freedom of speech.
Yeah, that's a possibility. It'd be very, very funny to hear these Palestinian activists talk about freedom of speech, because it's not what they want. But from their point of view, and they actually do have a point. I mean, I don't really consume mainstream media, but the dominant mainstream media is pro-Israel, I think. But the culture seems to be pro-Palestinian.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where you stand, because the pro-Israel people, the pro-Israel crowd that I hang out with, they all think that Joe Biden is holding Israel back from getting done what needs to be done, and I tell them that there's just no evidence for that, but it's the dominant narrative among my pro-Israel crowd, and it's absolutely fallacious. It's just it's just totally bogus.
That's funny you say that, because I was always trying to get my mind around. So a friend of mine who's strongly pro-Israel, his mother was in the Israeli army. His mother, not his father. His mother was in the Israeli army. They lived in Israel for a number of years. They met in Israel, and they were always complaining about having to fight with one arm tied behind their back. Yeah. Is this a phrase that you hear often in your
all the time, and there's just very little basis for it. I mean, it's like the spoiled child that you subsidize, right? Mm-hmm. You subsidize the spoiled child, and then you try to use some leverage that you think you have to stop the child from something heinous. And then it just complains, you're a dictator, you're destroying my life. I mean, Israel overwhelmingly does what it wants because of the alignment of how foreign policy power works in the United States. Like, Joe Biden couldn't stop Israel if he wanted to, right? He really doesn't have tools because the pro-Israel crowd is so strong. Now, they're not strong in terms of numbers of the American people. They're just very well organized, and they know how to exercise power. The pro-Palestine crowd doesn't really know how to exercise power, except they're starting to get better with the BDSM, boycott, divest, sanction, BDS movement. Yeah.
Have you heard of the term Pallywood?
No. So this refers to pro-Palestine people in Hollywood?
It's close, similar, but not exactly. It's Palestinians basically creating movies that exaggerate the extent of the repression done by Israelis. So, and then you could see, they wail and they have all these women in burqas and they're shouting towards the sky about how terrible things are. And then you pull back the camera and then, it's cut and then they're all laughing, right? This phenomenon of Palestinians exaggerating. And this is what, when I saw this with my own eyes on the internet, this is what just basically had me lose all sympathy for the Palestinians, because I felt like I was being lied to and systematically lied to for decades.
But I mean, Jews have done the same thing. I mean, the Kishinev pogroms, like Jews exaggerated that as like hundreds, thousands of people died in these pogroms. In reality, a few dozen. So many people didn't believe the stories of the Holocaust because so many Jewish activists had systematically lied and exaggerated about Jewish suffering in the past.
That's true. So it's left me very conflicted, but I don't have this overwhelming sympathy for Palestinians because it did and has seemed to me that there was sort of a path towards an amicable solution, and that, obviously I'm the recipient of media that's potentially very biased. So I have no direct on the ground experience there, but it did seem to me, and convincing cases have been made to me, that the Palestinians had an opportunity and had very many opportunities for a deal, and they would pretend to accept these deals, but use these deals as the basis, as sort of a strategic way of slowing down or retarding the Israeli occupation. That they would use the promise of peace as a tactic, not as a sincere intention.
Yeah, see, I don't buy that, but here's what I do believe, that the Palestinians have not provided a basis for people who don't have a strong feeling one way or another to side with them. So they're not contributing anything to the best of my knowledge. They just seem to create, disruption and dislocation and, horrific violence. And like, it's hard to look at the Palestinians and see rational reasons why you should side with them. Like, if you want people to side with your group, you need to provide rational reasons. For example, if you're part of a high IQ group, the reason that people should side with you is that your group provides far more in tax dollars than it takes out in government spending. Your group commits a much lower percentage of crime, particularly violent crime, than lower IQ groups. So I just don't see why someone who is indifferent between the two sides, Israel or Palestine, I just don't see a rational empirical basis why they'd be pro-Palestine. Now, I can understand that they'd have critiques of American foreign policy as not being in America's best interest, but that's very different from just emotionally and passionately siding with Palestine. I don't understand the empirical, rational basis for that unless you're looking at the world through certain ideological glasses.
No, but right. So if I look at some of these protests, what do I see? I just seen the same old sort of LGBTQ, Marxist this, Marxist that, the same old coalition that's always protesting everything, right? And this is just a latest, event that the sort of perennially hard done by, quote unquote, groups are just using to make hay. I look at these people. There's nobody. I look at the physiognomy of these people, and I don't want to be seen with them. These are the same sort of strange people, the strange BLM activist types. They just seem, icky.
Now, what if they weren't? Like, because I saw a lot of attractive members of the pro-Palestine crowd, and it really opened me up intellectually and morally to hearing their point of view.
I'm sure they exist, and there's reasons. Obviously, there's reason you can have a moral stance against this. But my problem is, having been around for a while and having observed these outbreaks, the Palestinians seem to they're not really that interested in peace when they perceive themselves to be winning. And as soon as they perceive themselves to be losing, then they have this really intense desire for peace. Now, and this is just sort of this basic, are you pro-peace or are you pro-Palestine? Are you pro-Palestinian, right? And this is the question I would like to know I would like to ask these protesters if I were ever inclined to attend one of these things, which of course I am not.
Right. I believe the truth is actually the opposite. The more their conditions improve and the more reason they have for hope, the less they support terrorism. I think this is pretty strongly empirically validated. The more desperate their situation, the more they are open to or supportive of terrorism. So I think it's the opposite. So even though you and I are pretty similar in many ways, the particulars of your critique, I think are often, I believe the truth lies in the opposite direction. I think that what you're articulating is the conservative talk radio pro-Israel talking points. I think the evidence is pretty clear that when Palestinians have reason for hope, that like any other people, they then have less interest in committing violent terrorism.
Well, okay, I hear you in that I'm very open to the possibility that I am subconsciously and reflexively repeating sort of right-wing Israeli talking points because I've ingested quite a number of them. At the same time, I do this. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine the Palestinians were Japanese. And the Japanese famously have a very high IQ.
Yes.
How do you think this conflict would be resolved differently?
Yeah, I do think it would be resolved differently. And I think if you listen to that Pakistani woman I interviewed early Sunday morning, when she made the point that the main problem here is that America is subsidizing Israel. I mean, that's a point that, as a pro-American patriot, you'd have to have sympathy for. Like, why exactly should a prosperous nation like Israel receive billions of American dollars? I mean, I can get behind that critique. Like, I really don't believe that Americans should be subsidizing Israel.
And I'm sympathetic to that. But I think an actual unfortunate consequence of that would be Israelis would feel a lot more cornered, and they would be likely to lash out far more violently than what we're seeing today.
Yeah, probably. So but number one, I don't care what they feel. You know, they got to stand on their own 2 feet. Like, I don't believe in coddling them. I don't believe in subsidizing people when they can stand on their own 2 feet. Israelis are perfectly capable of standing on their own 2 feet. And if they react more violently as a result of not being subsidized by America, I think in the long run, that would probably be the best thing. Like, sort these problems out and just deal with them definitively, powerfully, in a crushing fashion, and then you'll have peace. But not until this conflict has reached a crushing conclusion in either direction are you going to have peace.
Yeah, it's a sobering point you make. It might ultimately be the correct one. I do find it strange that basically every American alive needs to be obsessed with the question of Israel and the Palestinians.
Yeah. That's crazy.
It's not a natural state of affairs. So I have sympathy for those who make the argument that you're making. You know, and like or Ukraine for that matter, like, it's never been made clear to me why we need to kill ourselves and bankrupt ourselves to have the borders of Ukraine be just so. You know?
Right.
Maybe there is a reason. I just haven't heard it yet. But it's depressing. Like, you walk around, you look at the state of the cities in America, and you're thinking, you know, we could do something with some of that money, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, it just, the way that money just seems to be completely fictive, like we can just invent it to suit our needs at any given moment. And this whole tax ritual that we go through is just a performance. And that if we really need money, we just print it. It just seems like we're in this artificial state of being.
Well, it's not so artificial with the rise of inflation in the last 2 years. It's really come home to roost.
It has. All right, let me shift gears just slightly then.
Yes.
On the topic of finances and probity and diligence.
Yeah.
So, you know, tax season just came and went, and it was a pretty arduous process for me. And in the process of doing my taxes, I had to sort of figure out what I'd spent on what I'd spent on what. So I had to go through all of my bank statements and so forth.
Yeah.
And I came to discover that I was being defrauded by this outfit that was pretending to be Google. And they were sapping me of $200 or $300 a month.
Wow.
And this went on for over a year. And I tracked it down, and I made hay with the bank, and I got that money back. I got $2,000 back from the Bank of America.
Oh, good.
So, and I also looked at all the crap that I had been buying, all these subscriptions that I'd subscribed to that I don't really want or need. And so I just went on this killing spree, and I just got rid of every single one. And it felt so good, so empowering, you know, that I basically just gotten rid of everything, you know, and that I had the amount of me that was exposed to attack had just been reduced. And I just felt this sort of peace and ease. So this is a process I would recommend everybody do, even as boring as it is.
Yes.
But just go through your finances and just see what you're spending money on and ask yourself, do you really need to spend it? And so I figure like I've saved myself probably $2,000 a year in wasted, useless spending. It's not a fortune, but at the end of the year, $2,000 is a set of tires. It's a set of tires and brakes. It's money
and I guarantee you that there's a lot more. Like whenever you find something like that there's a lot more going on. So it's a basic of Debtors Anonymous that you track every dollar you spend and earn. And people who aren't flying into this live stream on the wings of victory should be tracking every dollar they spend and every dollar they earn. It is a tremendous discipline. You will spend less. You'll be much more careful if you track. Anything that you track, you'll have more of. If you track how you spend your time, you'll have more time. If you'll that's the foundation for getting out from under-earning, is tracking your time. So getting out from overspending, track your spending. But to get out from under-earning, track your time, because that will provide a mirror to your life, and you'll get some very, very painful realizations. And Cyberview in the chat says, I'm too lazy, Luke, I need an assistant. You will remain lazy until the pain of doing what you're currently doing outweighs the pain of changing. And Elliott, I just read this terrific book. It's called something like How to Change and 10 Reasons Why We Don't. And it's the first book that I've seen that reviews in detail all the reasons why we don't change. And let's say, for example, someone wants to lose weight, but they can't, get out of the habits that lead them to be overweight. And people don't tend to come to grips with all the reasons why they keep doing something that's maladaptive or suboptimal. But there are all sorts of reasons. There's comfort in it. It's familiar. It's safe to keep doing what you're doing. And it seems to me that for most people, overwhelmingly, taking action doesn't really get things done. It's the fundamental contemplation of coming to grips with why we have continued on in a suboptimal direction that then summons up this disgust, which I kind of hear underneath your voice, of carelessness with our spending. But if you spot carelessness in your spending, there's carelessness in all sorts of ways that you deploy your resources. It's just the tip of the iceberg. Any thoughts, Mr. Blatt?
You're absolutely right. And sometimes this behavior is sort of wrapped up in a story. This is my little, like you tell yourself a story about some of your maladaptive behaviors because that story is comforting to you. And it's too much, it's just too psychologically difficult for you to tell yourself a different story. This loss of self, this loss of identity, there's, so yes, I agree 100%. And, but in AA, so I've been listening to a lot of AA type of content, and I haven't formally gone through a 12-step program, but they talk about an inventory. And an inventory, I guess, is sort of just tough questions that you ask yourself to get some factual answers.
Yeah, it is who do you have resentments against? Because getting clarity on who you have resentments against, that will be the shining path to recovery.
But as you say, what you track, what you become aware of, what you pay attention to are the only things that you can change. And so you need to pay attention to them. And so I started doing other things like just keeping myself more organized. Even though I used to think of myself as being very organized, I found places where I could be more organized. Yes. And by doing that, I've saved myself a lot of time. And so one way in which I was really unorganized was just managing all of my passwords.
Yes.
You're always forced to change a password, then you forget your password, and then you have to change your password. And this is just a whole frustrating ordeal. And then I said, why don't I just write down all of my passwords? It's like never forget them. And I did that. And it's just been one layer of friction that's been removed from my life. And granted, this is probably like 1% of the friction in my life, but 1% is something. If you keep adding to those 1%, things tend to smooth out.
And is there anything that like more immediately makes one feel better than cleaning something, like organizing something and cleaning something, and getting a little bit more order in your life, whether it's just a corner of your room, a cupboard, your bathroom, kitchen, your car, just like a little vacuuming, a little dusting, a little cleaning. It immediately makes one feel better.
Law and order, bro. Law and order, just like Trump said. No, you're totally right. And I'm constantly doing that. And, I told you my travails with this person that I lived with me for a couple of months, and he filled my place with crap. And I've been slowly getting rid of all of this junk that he left me with. And it's so tedious because every time I have to move a box, it's 3 flights of stairs down. I have to get into a car. I have to drive to a storage facility. There's a lot of friction involved. And so this is the type of activity I would put off. But I've just basically taken the bull by the horns and just chipped away. You just chip away at things day after day, just like water eroding a rock. You just have to keep at it. And then eventually it'll just happen as if by magic. It'll just have happened. So anyway, small gains, Luke. You got to be content with small gains. And you're right. Cleaning and organizing, there's no more satisfying feeling.
And it's so quick. But it's such a quick way to turn around your mood.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Like I have this, it's sort of a long story. I don't know if I don't want to waste your time with a long story. So
okay.
I'll tell it someday.
Here, I'll just read you some bits from this book, How We Change and 10 Reasons Why We Don't. Because people like you and me, like those are the people who are in my life, all right? I'm not primarily hanging out with millionaires and billionaires, all right? Hanging out with people like ourselves, upstanding citizens who haven't achieved all that we want out of life. So one of the things that I primarily hear from people like you and me is you got to take action. But I think you got to take contemplation, right? You've got to get to that place where you recognize how you're being fed by your suboptimal behavior, and what would be a better way to feed yourself and provide some comfort when you improve your life. So this guy, Ross Ellenhorn, he writes, research shows us that deep and lasting change is typically the result of contemplation. To make a personal change in your life is to make a decision and to commit to that decision. The only way to make a committed decision that can lead to change is to do the hard human work of contemplating the pros and cons of your situation before you act. This is the adaptive part of depression, right? I often go into little mini depressions when I suffer some humiliating setback, and I stop habitual things that I do. Right, I take care of what needs to be done, but aside from what needs to be done, I stop. I contemplate where I went wrong, why I went wrong, and I start thinking of more intelligent ways to go forward, and then I play them out in my mind, and I try to see how they'll work out. So he says in this book, most people in the United States who quit habitual drinking do so without treatment, right? They quit this highly addictive habit on their own. People who quit drinking on their own stay sober longer than those who enter treatment. Right, people who take a serious, hard look at themselves and decide that not drinking is better for them than drinking, right, they achieve more sobriety than those who go to a treatment center. So the most effective change is the change that happens from within.
Marvelous. 2 quotes. 2 things, 2 points. 1, the Tao Te Ching, I think. Life is alternating periods of action and reflection. That you need to act and you need to reflect. Let your reflection inform your action. 2, writing. So I would like to take like this. This is sort of like a semi-gold mine to do in the coming months. Is to take like 12 hours and just do intense journaling. Like just write out everything that's going on in my mind and what I'm thinking and what I should be doing, what I have been doing, just write it all out. Literally, not think about it, but literally write it all out, because I think writing is a bridge step.
Yeah.
If you don't write it down,
the mirror to your mind.
Yeah, but it's the difference. It's like it's an intermediate step between having a fanciful notion and then preparing to actually take action. And that you can't jump from, imagining to action. You have to take a bridge step, and the bridge step is writing. So I am going to do that for myself sooner than later.
I like it. Good on you, mate.
Okay. All right, listen, I got to finish. I got to make some dinner now, so I may have to drop it. I'll be listening.
Okay, bro. Take care.
All right, Shalom. All right, bye. Blessings.
Much more likely to have it.
All right, let me play just a few of my TikToks here.
You let down your body armoring. When you let go your unnecessary bodily tension, right? Take some Alexander technique lessons and let go of habitual reactions to stimuli that aren't serving you and replacing them with more adaptive reactions to stimuli. When you let go of your body armoring, become softer and gentler inside. You'll open up your heart and your social life to connect with other people, and your life will start working a whole lot better and much more likely to have.
Okay, from the chat, Luke, do you not view the current battle of objective reality and parental rights versus transgender activism as one of the most critical? Yes, and it's one of the rare battles that it seems that the traditional side has been winning. So I think that's pretty cool.
If you're able to self-regulate, if you're able to be a good friend to yourself, if you're able to treat yourself with kindness and care and compassion, if you're able to understand what drives and motivates you and troubles you, then there's a really good chance that you're able to do the same for other people, and that you'd be a good friend, and that you can build up a support system and a community, and you can play a valuable role in other people's lives, and they can play a valuable role in your life. And when these awful things happen, like Gen X or Gen Z or Gen Y, whatever, takes political power, that you'll be able to deal with it. Come on, mate.
It's probably not going to really have anything to do with you, and I worry about that, and that's where I point to the fact that.
Yeah, he worries about that because he's wiser than you are. And he's just worrying about that because he sees all these threats that you don't see because he's morally superior. He's cognitively sharper. He has depth and wisdom because he studies the classics. So he's like Eric Weinstein, right? He's worrying about this and he's worrying about that. Sure hope you're grateful.
Again, the best solution, certainly the time.
He's like God's suffering servant. He's suffering for our sins.
And chat says, Luke, seems like you've ignored the transgender topic. Well, I did a whole much of a show with Ronnie Goldman a few weeks ago. I don't have anything new to say. It seems to be a pretty clear topic. I'm not sure I have much to add.
Can you milk every defeat and every frustration and every wrong turn you've made, to get the full lesson, so that you don't just run from your mistakes, but you kind of sit there and bathe in them and learn from them and grow and develop from them. There are a lot of ways that you can become a more adaptive human. Can you milk?
Okay, let's see. I've also started up my YouTube Shorts. Whoops. Come on, man.
Talking about how Richard Spencer's been on a tear the last few months, talked about how Republicans can't win without embracing the crazy. Right? Only by embracing the crazy can they win. And right, that's fun, right? That's not the type of talking point you're going to get on Fox News. Richard tends to state his opinions with great passion, and you sense that he really believes what he's saying.
But this idea that Republicans have to embrace the crazy to win, it's It's an exciting thing to hear, but it's also insane.
Develop a community that's so pro. So
They did not do it. They did not. They did not do it for Trump. They did it for freedom. Which freedoms? Which precise freedoms did they do it for? What
Talking about
freedoms did
January
they not
6th.
have? What, if anything, you're willing to sacrifice for? So I sacrifice my time. Okay, I don't look to martyr myself for bad reasons. They did.
Oh, come on, man.
They did not do it for Trump. They did it for freedom. Which freedoms? Which precise freedoms did they do it for? What freedoms did they not have? What, if anything, you're willing to sacrifice for? They did not.
Oh, man.
They did not do it for Trump. They did it for people who exaggerate their credentials. That's always just the tip of the iceberg. So I just don't know many exceptions to that. I just don't know people who are otherwise fine, upstanding, honest, but they just so happen to exaggerate their credentials. I just don't see that. It seems to always be people who exaggerate their credentials that they are fundamentally dishonest. There's something fundamentally rotten with them at their core. There's a statement in the Talmud that you can tell somebody's character by what they're like when they're drunk, what they're like when they're angry, and how they use their money. So you can tell someone's character often through internet blood sports, because you're going to get triggered because somebody's going to say something you think is unfair. People who exaggerate
to really reteach people how to set aside time in their daily life, no matter how busy, to take seriously the business of reading good books. Because in a world filled of bad things, of evil people, monsters, really, you're not going to find the heroes you want looking around you. But we've already seen everyone collapse.
Unless you're surrounded by good people. And how you can increase your odds of being surrounded by good people, you can be a good person yourself. How can you be a good person? You can get to know yourself, be a good friend to yourself. When you're in touch with yourself, and what drives you and what frightens you, right?
To really
Can you milk
real life? One way that I ran from myself is running. I took up long distance running when I was 11 years of age. And I'd run on average about 5-6 miles a day. On Sundays, I'd run 10-12 miles. I finished 5 marathons, and my parents didn't want me to do it. It's very unhealthy to strain yourself, particularly at that young age, running marathons. When I ran long distances, the exhaustion and the exertion just took away my anxiety. I didn't have to worry about my lack of normal connection to my schoolmates. I would just go running, and I'd listen to the radio, and I became a news junkie and a sports junkie. And that was another way that I kind of ran from myself, that I distracted myself by just obsessing about sports, obsessing about the news, obsessing about my running times, obsessing about my training regimen. One way that I... And I can... Jews are a hard group to impress. So I think if I ever get up to JF numbers, then I'll get a smidgen of respect for my advantages of Jews are a hard group to impress. So advantages, people give you feedback, and a lot of the times it's feedback you're going to particularly enjoy. People give you feedback, and a lot of the times it's feedback you're going to particularly enjoy. So my reputation in the Orthodox Jewish community is Luke Ford, that Meshuggah, spends all his time talking to Goyim on YouTube for bupkis. Orthodox Jews are a hard group to impress. Okay, that'll do it.